Welcome to News with a View, hosted by me, John A. Costa. It is April 26th, and this is episode 58. Trying to get a couple of these in here this week. It's, of course, Saturday, so not much out there that I haven't talked about already. But in today's podcast, some of the information I'll speak on is the trade and tariffs, which I said the other day that I would speak about. I have noticed online so much misinformation by posters that I wanted to set some things straight here. Where they have the wrong concept or wrong idea of what is transpiring and why, and what is right now legally allowed to happen, and then other scenarios are where we're going to need to have the courts interpret what is the legal avenue up to the Supreme Court. And that's the way that it should work. Just because one court says a party can't do something, or a party can do something, doesn't necessarily mean it's correct. If it goes up to the next level and the courts deem that, the other court, they'd send it back and go, this is where we think that you have not explored. Or you'll have a court that goes, yeah, we agree with that, and then you can take it up to the next court, all the way up to the Supreme Court. Just because you petition the Supreme Court to hear an argument doesn't mean they have to do it. They could turn around and go, we're not going to do that one. And it can be arbitrary and it could be capricious, but they can do it. So, just saying. And the other item that I'm going to start off with today is, I'm going to go switching to my favorite camera. The other thing that I'm going to start off with today, and this has been in the news, and but I really hadn't spoken about it. And that was the New Mexico judge and his wife who tried to hide evidence of an illegal alien gang member who they had allowed to live in their home. It goes beyond thought that an ex-judge would do this, knowing that the person that they're bringing into their home is a gang member, and this is there's got to be more to the story here, and the more to the story is, did this judge collude with this particular gang for rulings that would go in the defendant's favor? I would say from the fact that this ex-judge, this was not happening. He was not a judge when they raided his home. So I'm just going to move in here a little bit more. But it shows that he might have been used by this gang as a paid-for judge. So a lot going on there. this Judge Joel Cano and his wife Nancy Cano, they were arrested Thursday by federal agents in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And, of course, people are saying, well, the judge is responsible. Well, he wasn't a judge at the time. So he's not responsible for upholding the court and stuff. But he is still, as a citizen, you can't break the law. Now, what he did, again, this whole idea is that has he done this in the past? Has he worked with this particular gang? And there's a lot that needs to be looked at here. And who else was he working with? Was any of the district attorneys or any of the ADAs? Who was also involved, if anyone? Not saying that anyone was involved other than these two. But it goes to show what people have been saying, that a lot of this stuff couldn't happen unless you had people on the inside working. How could a lot of this stuff take place? And this is just starting, so we might find out other things, and they're innocent until they're not really innocent until proven guilty. The assumption of innocence until proven guilty. Big difference on how that works. And then we go to the FBI arrested a judge in Milwaukee on Friday, alleging that she obstructed federal authorities who were seeking to detain an undocumented immigrant and illegal. And she assisted this illegal and his attorney by escorting the man and his defense attorney through a non-public jury door and eluding the federal ICE from detaining this individual. Yeah, not a good idea to do. Now, this judge could say that it's her court and she can do as she pleases with her court. Of course, Andrew Weissman, who a former top justice prosecutor in the Department of Justice, said that this will be a hard reach for the authorities to prosecute and what was the motivation of the FBI in arresting her. So, and Weissman, what's the president is doing with ICE and deportation and his other agenda, this is all what he's doing. It's an intimidation, he said it's meant to send a chilling effect. Well, if the chilling effect is that you obey the law, I don't know how much of a problem people should have with that. And this is my take on what is going on and going to be in both of these cases. And what is going on in general with the president's executive orders. And I said what President Trump is doing with ICE and deportations and his other executive order agendas is challenging and using the interpretation of the laws to invoke his action. So he is looking at the law, looking at the Constitution, and saying this is what it means, which is okay. You can do that. And now you can jump into the democratic principles. What is also taking place is the challenge of Trump's interpretation of what he can do through the Constitution and laws. And that goes through the courts. And where you scream that democracy is on the line, the liberals and progressives are all screaming that Democrats, democracy is on the line. No, democracy is not on the line. Democracy is just doing fine because you're taking these and challenging them through the courts. And when the courts do not rule in favor of one of the parties, that party then has the democratic right to kick it up. I'm going to take it to another court until there's no other court that I could take it to. And then the ruling stands. As long as you object it. You know, if you don't object to the ruling by a court, well, then that ruling stands. If you object to it and go, I'm going to appeal this, it could be where the courts turn around and go, hey, that's great, you can appeal all you want, but until it's appealed, the other party can do what they want to do. Or you have to stop what you're doing because I ruled against you. And just because you're saying, hey, I think you're wrong, I'm going to keep doing it until another court tells me I'm wrong. No, you can't do that. You have to stop. So the democratic process is in play here. I said the other day where the government sent the Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador. And a judge goes, whoa, I told you not to do that. I told you couldn't do that. And the prosecutor, in this case, it's different than a prosecutor, but you have the Department of Justice, who is the plaintiff to say we can do this. And then you have the other group saying, no, we're fighting this. So the Department of Justice is the defendant. And the Department of Justice goes, whoa, that wasn't us. This order only pertains to Homeland Security. It doesn't pertain to the Department of Defense who moved these guys. Well, judges hate when you play games with their orders. And like I said yesterday, not a good idea to play these type of games. Could it be that they are legally correct in the verbiage of everything? Yeah, but the scope of the intent was the government. And the government is up here, and then all the other branches are down here. So you now are going to have a judge go, okay, the government. And not the agency, but the government who controls all those agencies. It's just what I would consider bad form on the part of the Department of Justice. Bad form, and I think that that's going to come back to bite them. as it should, because they shouldn't be doing that. And I've said before, I will take both sides. I will look at both sides. And if you're allowed to do it, you can do it. But again, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Because it's going to come back, and it really wasn't worth it. To me, it wasn't worth it. Because now you'll have a judge rule harder than you might have wanted him to, or her. It just doesn't make sense. All right. We'll leave that as there. We'll get more information as we go along. My other thing that I said I was going to talk about today is tariffs and how the president is being challenged on tariff and trade. And just give a little quick history on where we are with this, because you have politicians and you have the media all yelling that only Congress can set the tariffs. And while the Constitution does say that, there have been laws enacted that don't amend it, but address to that Constitution, thus making it legal for the president to set tariffs. So, in the 1930s, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the great Democrat, the New Deal trade policy, the Export-Import Bank Agreement, and the Reciprocal Trade Agreement Act of 1934. Now, the I keep saying it's the Export-Import Bank Act, was made up of going overseas during, and this was, I think, 1933, meeting with 66 other nations in addressing the safest way to extract everyone out of the Depression. And the cooperation of such as a reduction of trade barriers and stabilization of exchange rates. And this was because some countries stayed on the gold standard, while America and Great Britain got out of the gold standard in 1933. We got out of the gold standard. I'm sorry, the United Kingdom got out of the gold standard in 1931, and we got out of the gold standard in 1933. But like countries like France and some other countries, they stayed in the gold system. So they're using a method to calculate trade that we didn't recognize, and vice versa. So it became difficult. So they tried to hold a conference, and they tried to set this all up. They met I think they met in London during the London Economic Conference, and it lasted a couple of weeks. It didn't work. They couldn't get everyone on board. So in 1934, Roosevelt undertook two initiatives that signal a desire to re-engage economically with the rest of the world. So, and he established the bank as an institution designed to finance U.S. trade, and that's the Export-Import Bank, with the newly recognized Soviet Union. So part of the problem was Europe was going to deal with the Soviet Union. We couldn't. We were steadfast against it, and finally Roosevelt just said, hey, the Soviet Union's not going anywhere. We're going to have to deal with them as a trading partner and part of this institution. So this was the import bank. Following the following month, the one intended to financial trade also with Cuba. In 1934, the second bank's field of operation was expanded to include all countries save the Soviet Union. So he hit a lot of bumps in the road, and he goes, all right, fine, we won't deal with the Soviet Union. And then in 1935, the two banks were combined. You had an import bank and an export bank. The two banks were combined, and Congress passed legislation granting the newly unified banks more power and more capital. In the years before the start of the Second World War, while it was extended credit to countries outside the Western Hemisphere, such as Italy and China, the Export-Import Bank concentrated its efforts in Latin America, where it proved an important component of the good neighbor policy. So back in the 1930s, now when we're talking mid-1930s, the United States government was realizing that Europe was in trouble, that a conflict was brewing, and while we were looking to stabilize our relationship in Europe, we realized we better stabilize the Western Hemisphere. And that was trade agreements with Cuba, which was an independent, and South America, because we got a lot of our we got most of our rubber out of South America. Also in Indochina, we got cheap rubber. But we knew that could become a problem. And since Japan had already gone into China and started taking over areas of China, we knew that this was going to be a problem. So the second foreign policy initiative taken in 1934, and this is a biggie because this affects us today and gets into how the president was able to get control of tariffs, even though the Congress in the Constitution says it's their job. All right, so in 1934, the Reciprocal Trade Agreement Act, the RTAA, that a full and permanent domestic recovery depends in part on a revived and strengthening international trade. President Roosevelt asked Congress for authority to negotiate trade agreements based upon reciprocal tariff reductions with other countries. So if it was 25% and mine was 30%. If they kept theirs at 25, we'd take ours at 25. If they were at 30 and we were at 25, hey, cut yours down and we'll do business with you. And so this is what was done. Now, again, this was done on a temporary basis, subject to renewal after 3 years. The Smoot-Harley tariff, in exchange for tariff concessions by other countries, such tariff reductions would be brought into force through executive agreements rather than treaties requiring Senate U.S. approval. And that Smoot-Harley tariff was only 3 years, and then it expired. And that expired in 1933, in which then is why 1934 happened in the RTAA. And under the agreement, rather than treaties requiring Senate approval, tariff cuts negotiated under the RTAA would also be extended to all third countries to which the United States had an accord most favored nation status. So, England, Canada, Australia, might be China. I mean, whoever these countries were, and most favored status, they got our tariff taken care of, and the agreement and treaties did not need to go and be. These weren't treaties in the sense of. These were then executive agreements rather than treaties. A treaty would have to go through the Senate for approval. So this is where executive action took place and allowed the president to jump over the Congresses. Very important. Very, very, very important. Now, this also had some limits on it. In 1934 and then 1939, the Roosevelt administration concluded trade agreements with 19 countries under the RTAA: Belgium, Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Czechoslovakia, Ecuador, El Salvador, Finland, France, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, Netherlands, Nicaragua, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. Now, when they made these agreements, and we'll take Belgium as an example, that agreement then took in every place Belgium had a territory. And where was Belgium? Belgium was in Africa. Belgium was in the Caribbean. Belgium was all over. The same thing with Finland. Not so much Finland, but we're going to say France, the Netherlands, and of course the United Kingdom. So this went on till 1945. The tariff negotiating procedures established under RTA programs provided the model for the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trades, GATT. Haven't heard that term in a long time. The agreement signed by 23 countries in 1947, and that provided the framework for multiple trade liberations in post-World War II. So, the Reciprocal Trade Act of 1934 is no longer in its original form. But the principle of reciprocity, meaning the back and forth, continues to influence the U.S. trade through the Trade Promotion Authority, TPA. Now, the TPA is really where the President Trump's recent actions, including the impositions of reciprocal tariffs based on the idea of ensuring fair trade practices. And this is important because you don't need Congress to make this announcement. So, what is TPA? And of course, TPA, Trade Promotion Authority. And this was since 1974. Congress has enacted the TPA legislation that defines U.S. negotiating objectives and priorities for trade agreements and establishes consultation and notification requirements for the President to follow throughout negotiation process. Okay, so there's guidelines set up by Congress that are in there today that the President must adhere to. But here's the real kicker. And remember, in the law, the words I use at the dinner table and those same words used in law can differ. So you got to be careful. At the end of the negotiations and consultation process, only then does Congress give the agreement an up or down vote. So, in the meantime, Trump or any president can go out there and negotiate. He just has to tell Congress, hey, I'm negotiating with these people. And he has to keep Congress updated. And he has those people contacted on what he's planning on doing. And when there is a handshake agreement, a deal, the president can approve the deal, but the Congress has to ratify it. And the Senate, and if it's a treaty, then it has to go to the Senate, but Congress then has to have its thumbs up, thumbs down. And this is without any amendments. But the TPA reaffirms Congress's overall constitutional role in development and oversight of U.S. trade policy. So what has still taken place is the president's authority to set trade tariffs. And when an agreement comes along, then it has to go to the Congress to be approved. And it's up to Congress to come up with the framework to say these are the guidelines that the president can use. And this is our role in the oversight. Now, if the Congress hasn't made any new oversights or changed their role or their development of such, you go what's in front of you. If Congress wants to change that, then Congress must then do it and then put it to a vote, approve it, and then that becomes the new guideline. So the key elements of the TPA, Trade Promotion Authority, outlines congressional guidance to the president on trade policy priorities and negotiating objectives. All right. Establish congressional requirements for the administration to notify and consult with Congress, with the private sector and other stakeholders, and with the public during the negotiations of trade agreements. Well, Trump is doing all that. The TPA through Congress, that's already there, so he already knows what the goals are. Okay, TPA defines terms, conditions, and procedures under which Congress allows the administration to enter into trade agreements and sets the procedures for congressional consideration of bills to implement the agreement. So, this is where, again, these are treaties, these are trade agreements that must go through the Congresses. Trump can create them using the outline of what he's allowed to do, and he has his trade administrators that do this, but of course Trump gets his, they put this in, take that out, no. And then all that is then sent to the Congress to implement the agreement. And that's, the vote, yay, nay. That's all being done. Anything that Trump has made agreements on with tariffs and with other nations, it's all being written up, and that will be given to Congress at the end of all this. Or I don't know if it will be at the end of all this. So I'm not sure on, is it an individual process or the whole undertaking of restructuring the tariffs? Now, the idea of tariffs. The legality. Although the U.S. Constitution grants Congress the sole authority to levy taxes, including tariffs, Congress has passed laws allowing the president to impose tariffs for national security reasons unilaterally. This is the language that gets questioned. Is this a national security issue? And you'll have some sides say, it's an economical issue. And if Trump is saying, well, if the economics become so unstable that it destroys our country, is that not a national security issue? You have people know, of course that's a national security issue. And you could just take the other side and go, no, I understand what you're saying, but show me where it's a national security. Show me how this is going to collapse our system. And it's the chicken and the egg. So it will be up to the current administration, if it gets challenged all the way up to the robes, to defend their position of this is a national security. We can't continue giving a favored trade status to China when they don't do it in return to us. And right now it's costing us $3 billion a day in interest. And that's not with paying anything down. That's just interest. So there's just no way we could collect all this money. There's no way for us to pay this back. We'll have to default, and that could be the collapse of our nation, and collapse of our military, and our place in the world. So is it a national security issue? Yeah, you bet it is. Now, I think Trump will win this argument. This is an argument that Trump can win. So the presidential discretionary authority over the tariffs, and that's Section 201 of the Trade Act of 1974, empowers the president to raise tariff rates temporarily when the U.S. International Trade Commission determines that a sudden import surge has caused or threatened serious injury to the U.S. industry. I think that can be proved. And I think that Trump putting people into the ITC will go, yeah, the president's correct. This is our assessment of the situation, and yeah. Now, these tariffs, though, can only be temporary until he establishes a treaty, let's say, or a contract, a trade agreement, and then that becomes whatever that is, sticks. So there's a lifespan on that stuff too. That might, China might go, yeah, all right, we'll give you a 2-year thing, and then we'll come back and revisit it. Or we'll revisit it every 90 days. But we'll lower it, and you'll lower yours, and we'll have a 90-day agreement, and Congress will approve it or not. And if not, then you go back to the drawing board, and you go to 200%. They can go up to 500%. There is no limit. I would say that most countries are going to jump on this and make some type of arrangement with us. I know Japan is fighting with us a little bit with it, and I think one of their automakers has already said that they're going to build vehicles back in Japan, but they're only going to sell them to Canada. And they're not going to offer those cars here, or the cars are still going to be built here, and but they're taking some of the manufacturing back out to Canada, because for the U.S. to move it over to Canada, there's a huge trade balance, where if they take those cars and make them in Japan, which has a trade agreement with Canada, it's a lot less of a tariff, and it makes sense. So this will be interesting, because what was happening before, these cars were being made over here in America and sold in America, and then also being exported over to Canada at a favorable trade rate. And now that's gone. So the cars still, let's say there's 17,000 cars manufactured at that plant in Indiana. And 17,000, or let's say there were 30,000 cars made in Indiana. And 17,000 were sold in the United States, and 13,000 were exported to Canada and Mexico. Well, they might build those 13,000 cars now in Japan and then ship them, because they have favorable tariffs. So the jobs are not going away, but you might not need as many people to do the job, because you're not building 30,000, you're only building 17,000. So this is what they're saying they're going to do. Japan. Which is the problem of having separate tariffs like that. But that's a loophole that they can do, and they manufacture these cars in Japan. So building 13,000 more at that plant won't be any harder for them, unless they're getting their materials from the United States, which you're not. You're getting everything from China, who continues to have a good trade agreement with Japan. So I'm just saying, and I always say, I will look at both sides of an argument. And, look for the common sense approach to it. What I think it does is logistically throws a hammer into Japan. Now we need to gear up our plants there for a possible temporary buildup, and shipping and exporting. Is it worth it just to poke the United States in the eye, or is it just better to make some type of deal with the United States, who protects Japan? And as long as it doesn't become lopsided for Japan. Japan has its own interests that it has to look at, and that's not, unrealistic to go, hey, they gotta look at what's good for them too. So, yeah, I think there's plenty of room. I think Trump is doing fine, and that's me saying it. You can argue with me all you want with it, but I was explaining where people go, Trump can't do that. No, he can do it. He's authorized to do it. You can get down to the brass tacks over here and go, we're not being invaded. This is not going on. It's not wartime of national security. And they could make that argument. That's part of the democratic process. You are allowed a defense. So have at it. I just think it's a waste of time for some of these arguments. There's other arguments that positively, absolutely have to go to the courts. That and I said this, and of the executive orders that he has signed, 80% of them just affect the executive branch. So, as the word is written, the deed is done for the executive branch. For some of these other ones, and where there's constitutional language, as in this too, that needs to be sorted out. And I think this is going to go to the ropes. And the ropes will agree with Trump on this. And I think the ropes will not, in the end, side with Trump on DEI, except in the federal government run by the executive branch. I think industry can have any rule they'd like, and policy, as long as the policy doesn't conflict with state law or constitutional law, have at it. So I think on that side of the coin, Trump loses. And he won't win that. He's not going to win every one of these cases. We know he's not going to win every one of these cases. What he's trying to say is, I made a campaign promise, and, the Democrats challenged me, and I lost it in court. Bad ruling, terrible ruling, but c'est la vie. And some of that knowing that he was going to lose. He just couldn't do it. Some of his things that he wants to do with schools, and I don't think that that it could be a toss-up. That could be a toss-up. But I think since you have a conservative-leaning Supreme Court, some of that will stick. The idea of money and DEI, if you don't follow, you got to get rid of your DEI, or you don't get the money. I think that's a valid complaint to be made by the federal government. If you're going to come and ask me for the money, I'm going to have strings attached to that. And I'm not going to ask you to violate the Constitution. But the DEI is not part of the Constitution. The DEI, I don't have to be friends with someone. I don't have to include those people in the private sector. I don't have to do that, not even the federal sector. I don't have to have diversity. See, those are all unconstitutional items. So I have to have, how many nations are there here, that we represent around the world? So diversity means I have to have one of those each in every one of my companies, and no. Diversity doesn't apply. Equity. I don't have to have equity. If you have an 8th grade education and Paul over here has a graduate degree and he's working in management, Paul's working in management, and you are working in assembly, and Paul is getting $150,000 and you're getting $28,000. I don't have to bring you up to Paul. I don't have to give you equity. Nor do I have to say, I have to include you in meetings that Paul is having with the people that are on the assembly line. I don't have to do that. And they don't have to, they have no part of the say. So, you want to have that for a club? I'd even say you don't have to do that. This was affirmative action. DEI was affirmative action. Just in repackaging. So you can't have that. And if you do it, you can have at it. Not get money from the government. And that's not saying, well, now you're hindering my free speech. No, I'm not hindering your free speech. You could say whatever you like to. Go ahead. I don't have to pay per word for it. There. So I'm not stopping you from doing it. All I'm doing is I'm not paying you to do it. But you can still do it. You want to do it for free? Do it for free. But I shouldn't have to pay for it. There you go. All right. I'm cutting this down. Let's see. What time did I go? We've been going for about an hour. So, I know this was a bit confusing. You're going to have to run it through, look it up. It's all out there. Again, some of this is written. I look at it and I go, well, that's how I read it. And you look, that's not what it means, and that's fine. See, that is democracy in play. When I hear people say, we're losing our democracy. No, we're not. If anything, This is assuring our democracy. Now, if you don't like how that democratic process is working for you, tough. But it's being equally applied. And if you don't like the outcome of it because it did not meet your agenda, and that goes for both sides, tough. It's not just one-sided. Ha, we won, you lost. No. You can't do that. You got to abide by that, and that's it. And when it gets up to the robes, if the robes hear it, or if the next court wants to hear it, where, they could take it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court goes, we're not listening to it because that court got it right. And we don't have to reaffirm that they're right. 3 out of 3 got it, or 2 out of 3 got it. Hey, we're done here. We're not, we're not stepping on over them unless we feel that they really, it was wrong. But if we look at it and go, no, there's no reason for us to intervene here. Again, c'est la vie. And with that, I'm going to say good night. I'll get this up in about the next 2 hours. I always say that. It takes me about 3. Say a prayer. Prayer always works. Donate if you can. Even if you go to the food store and you buy 2 or 3 extra cans of something, drop that off at a food bank. You're helping in your own little way. And if everyone did that, can you imagine how wonderful it would be for certain people? And I'm not going to sit there and judge people who go to a food bank, whether or not, this or that. I've seen the food bank help a lot of people in need. So, money always helps. Give to a registered charity or a charity you know of. They don't come to you, you must go to them. Do not become a victim helping a victim. Again, Chris, Rowan, Danielle, Paul, Cannoli, I'll be in touch. And just letting you all know, the official statement I will be making here is Fat Guy is going on a major diet. That's going to be starting, and I have to do it after mid-June. I can't do it now because I'm going to be going away, and then in June, the mid part of June, I'm going to be going to graduations and stuff, and the idea of, sticking to a rigid diet. But the Fat Guy has to lose at least 35 to 40 pounds. And that's the verdict. So, yeah. So, my drinking will go down, and the last 2 years I've been not drinking bad, eating bad, really eating bad. But all good things must come to an end. And the Fat Guy, he got the word. It's 30 to 40 pounds. Let the fun begin. And with that, I'm going to fade to black.